The story begins on a bloody battlefield, with heavy artillery shells exploding into screaming soldiers. After holding off the enemy, the defending side decides it's time to make its move. Their soldiers rush from their bunkers towards the enemy ranks, but most of them die before getting anywhere. The ones that survive are left without any support, screaming in terror. The surviving soldiers wonder if their reinforcements will ever arrive. At the very last moment, a group of flying mages finally appears and bombards the enemy soldiers. They rescue their remaining soldiers and retreat into the sky, unable to withstand all of the enemy's attacks despite their magic powers. Frustrated, one of the mages asks his squadmate Victoria if they've received any new orders for the battlefield. However, she explains that they've been ordered to continue defending their front lines no matter what. Suddenly, an enemy shell hurtles towards her and knocks her away despite her magic shield. Then, Victoria's platoon commander, a young girl called Tanya, appears in the sky and prays to her deity before unleashing a devastating explosion spell at the enemy camp. The explosion completely destroys the impressive enemy side, leaving Victoria stunned. However, Tanya doesn't give her the time to appreciate the view. She reminds her that it's dangerous to let her guard down, and that she should remember her duty to obey their higher-ups, even if she's assigned to defend a doomed area to the death. In this world, there exists an extremely powerful military nation called the Empire, which is basically bootleg Nazi Germany. Though the Empire possesses complete superiority over the other nations, it remains surrounded by enemies from all sides, with its strongest rival being the Republic. Even the mighty Empire is unable to defeat all its enemies at once, so its higher-ups have decided to defend all of their attacked areas with their forces. They plan to delay the enemy with expendable soldiers, giving their special forces enough time to reach and conquer each zone one by one. In the Empire's capital of Reborn, Brigadier Kurt asks Colonel Erich about the situation on the Rhine Theater battlefield, where Officer Tanya and her squad were stationed. Erich asks the Brigadier if they should pull their losing defenses back, but Kurt notes that it puts their civilian land at risk. In the end, he gets frustrated, knowing that the Empire has made a mistake by recklessly taking on so many enemies. General Hans notes that the plan to defend each zone with fortified troops has failed, so he suggests using a mobile defense. Erich points out that their forces are depleted, but Hans explains that they've sent all backup troops to provide support. Despite the military's efforts, he knows that the Rhine Theater is a hellzone for all those stuck there. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, as injured soldiers retreat to the Empire, Tanya and her squad patrol from high above. As Tanya spots enemy movement on the ground, she orders Victoria to bombard them with artillery attacks. While Victoria obeys and shoots, two of Tanya's soldiers, called Harold and Kirst, feel frustrated watching their own soldiers die to enemy artillery. They move to destroy the artillery, but Tanya warns them that their job is only to suppress the enemy from above. However, the stubborn men disobey her orders and rush in anyway, which causes her expression to freeze over with rage. Later, as the troops are on a break, she calls Harold and Kirst for a private meeting. Tanya tells both of them to go home, since they're so disobedient, but both men stubbornly try to justify their earlier actions. She warns them that even if they act out of good intentions, they might make a mistake and sabotage their own soldiers by straying from the plan. Not taking her seriously, the two soldiers become arrogant and refuse to accept her decision. Seeing their audacity, Tanya gets enraged and begins to pull her gun, but Victoria stops her. Then, she calms down and agrees to let the soldiers stay in the troop after a little punishment. The next day, as Victoria is getting ready to move out, Lieutenant Eitlin greets her. She learns from him that Harold and Kirst are still with their platoon, but Tanya has sent them to a pillbox at the rear as punishment for their earlier behavior. Hearing this, Victoria is surprised that Tanya was so kind to them. Later, the platoon has a rough day as enemy bombardments increase on their camp. After a tough battle, Victoria struggles to catch her breath, so Tanya tells her to stop wasting the Empire's time with her weakness. Then, she calls an emergency meeting, where she learns that the enemy has trapped their platoon's scouts. Tanya offers to rescue their scouts, but her commander wonders if she can even pull it off. She nods but tells him that Victoria won't come with her since she's too exhausted. Hearing this, Victoria feels upset and stubbornly joins the rescue mission despite her protests. Afterward, she thanks Tanya for trying to be kind to her. Acting like it's tsundere, Tanya refuses to address her thanks and instead tells her to get ready for the mission. The next day, the scout troop desperately tries to survive an onslaught of Republican soldiers. Knowing that they can't rely on reinforcements, they try to distract the enemy with magic techniques. In the air, the Republican mages are unable to find the Imperial scouts, so their leader grows frustrated and orders his mages to blow up the entire area. Since this would deplete their mana, they protest against it. But he forces them to do it anyway. As the bombs go off around the scouts' location, all of them die, and the Imperial reinforcements are alerted to their deaths. Angered by this provocation, Tanya charges into the enemy battalion without fear. As the Republicans spot her, they try to shoot her down with magic bullets. However, she barges into their ranks and outmaneuvers all of their shots. Then, after she takes out their mages, the Republican leader realizes his troops are completely outmatched against this monster. He orders his soldiers to climb high into the sky and retreat. While issuing the order, he fails to realize that Tanya is right in front of him. One of his subordinates jumps out to protect him, but Tanya cuts through him like paper. Then, she ascends into the sky, taking out some of the escaping Republicans before flying even higher. Confused, the remaining Republicans are forced to stop since they physically cannot climb any higher. To their shock, Tanya goes miles high into the sky before speaking with them through broadcast. Speaking like a true German dictator, she warns the Republicans that they have sinned by crossing her mighty empire. She warns them to turn back and suffer the consequences. But the stupid Republicans start mocking her childish voice instead. Enraged, Tanya prepares to eradicate them all. Safe in the clouds, she prepares the ultimate offensive skill and warns her own soldiers to take cover. As the magic charges, her body is covered by a brilliant glow from her amulet. Then, Tanya infuses her mana into one bullet and shoots it towards the enemy. Supercharged by her spell, the bullet erupts into a massive mushroom cloud and annihilates the Republican soldiers. News of Tanya's single-handed victory reaches the capital, and the higher-ups take note of her shining achievements. Even though Tanya is an ace mage known by her title of Silver Wings, Colonel Eric is shocked that she was sent to the Rhine Theater. He knows that despite her talent, Tanya happens to be a literal devil in human form. In a battlefield with no rules, this devil has free reign to unleash her rage however she wants. Back at the Rhine camp, Victoria learns that Kurtz and Harold were killed by an artillery strike on their pillbox. She reports this to Victoria, who seems amused. Seeing her attitude, Victoria wonders if she knew this would happen. Grinning, Tanya admits that she simply fulfilled their wish of dying on the battlefield. Watching the devilish grin on her face, Victoria is stunned, realizing that her kind commander intentionally sent those disobedient fools to die. To understand Tanya's actions and background, we see the story of her past. In reality, she is a person who has reincarnated into a new world from her previous life. Back then, Tanya was a middle-aged corporate worker living in a developed country. He was a slave to his corporate masters. Working in the HR department, he ruthlessly fired a poor man who begged him to give him another chance for the sake of his family. Although he felt pity for the people he fired, Tanya never truly cared for them as long as he got paid. After getting off work, he waited at the train station to go home, thinking that his life was set as long as he kept climbing up the corporate ladder. However, the man he had fired earlier snuck behind him in the station and pushed him right in front of an incoming train. In his final moments, time actually stopped for Tanya. One by one, the people in the station started speaking, mocking him for losing all sense of humanity. They scolded him for his lack of empathy and faith in their creator. Tanya finally understood that this person is calling himself God, but he confidently claimed that he didn't believe in him. In his mind, only weak people, who couldn't find a way to solve their problems, held faith in a god to help them. He thought that if the world got scientifically advanced enough, nobody would need to have faith. Refusing to believe in the so-called god, he called him Being X instead. Being X revealed that he was the master of reincarnation in his world. Tired of managing 7 billion ungrateful people like him, Tanya taunted him for his incompetence. So Being X decided to reincarnate him into a world where he would experience the misery of the poor he looked down on. Hearing this, Tanya finally lost his smug tone and begged for mercy. But it was already too late. In the new world, Tanya was born as an orphan girl raised by poor nuns. Since her country was at war, the nuns struggled to raise all the orphans under their care. However, Tanya discovered that magic existed in this world. She had been tested as a young child, with an impressive grade of magic talent. Living in the desolate orphanage, Tanya knew she had no way of getting richer in the war-struck country unless she used her talent as a mage. Even though she didn't want to fight, she decided to join a military school to secure a comfortable position in the rear. As time passed, she climbed up the ranks in training and eventually became the leader of a small squadron. Seeing a young girl as their leader, the experienced soldiers looked down on her. In the face of their taunts, Tanya went completely insane as any person with freshly obtained power would. She blasted a hole in their training room, then stomped on a soldier who resisted her. In Tanya's mind, a disobedient soldier deserved death. As she pointed her gun at the man's head, Even Colonel Eric was shocked by her ruthlessness, and he stopped her before things could get ugly. Despite that incident, Tanya continued growing because of her fighting and leadership talent. Eventually, she had to pass one final training in the Northern Garrison to graduate. In the Northern Garrison, she scouted the area for enemy movements. After spotting enemy infantry moving towards their borders, she informed her squad. Reacting to her intel, they shot artillery at the targets and accurately took them down. At Tanya's altitude, she easily guided the artillery to snipe all of the enemies before they could get too close. However, the enemy alliance also had a team of mages with their infantry, facing the devastating enemy artillery. Their leader mage decided to eliminate their scout, Tanya, to lessen their losses. As Tanya headed over to scout for another line, she received an emergency contact from her squad. However, the radio was muffled due to magic interference, so she couldn't understand them. Suddenly, a barrage of magic bullets shot at her out of nowhere. Although Tanya blocked it with her shield, she knew she was outnumbered. She contacted her squad for support, who told her that air reinforcements would need over 6 minutes to arrive. Realizing she was alone, Tanya asked for permission to escape, but her leader ordered her to hold down the enemy as long as she could. Hearing this, she got angered and turned around to fight the enemy squad by herself. Faced with almost certain death, she decided this was a chance to prove her loyalty to her country. She engaged in an intense fight, swerving around and avoiding enemy blows. Although Tanya bravely took out some enemy mages, she eventually ran out of ammo. This gave her the perfect chance to put up a heroic performance. Suddenly, she hugged an enemy and self-destructed the magic crest on her uniform. The explosion killed several enemies and sent Tanya plummeting to the ground, making her look like a war hero who sacrificed everything for her country. Somehow, she survived and was rescued. In the hospital, she thought that she would retire as an honored veteran or be protected in the rear echelons for a little while. However, the higher-ups were giving her medical treatment and preparing to use her as an ace for the military. In light of her bravery, they honored her with a Silver Wings Assault Badge, and Tanya realized that she was only going to see even more action from them on. As news of her achievements spread, a mad scientist looked at Tanya's incredible magic capacity and control. He grinned madly, thinking he had gotten the perfect test subject for his strongest creations. A few days later, Tanya had healed from her injuries. A commander called her to assign a new rank, explaining that she would be sent to instruct a small unit of her own. Although Tanya was overjoyed on the inside, on the surface she acted as if she didn't want to wait on the sidelines. The commander explained he couldn't send her to the front lines since she was so young, so she accepted her new rank. Then, he told her to head to the supply department to test out a prototype mage gadget called a computational jewel. Tanya accepted, thinking it would be a normal test, but the jewel sent her flying into the sky out of control. In the end, it exploded from its own instability, and Tanya experienced many other traumatic failures after that incident. One day, the scientists gave her a special computational jewel called Elenium-95, which was created by fusing the power of 4 jewels into one. Although the scientists hoped that this jewel would give its user a revolutionary flying ability, the sheer amount of energy concentrated within it caused the whole jewel to be unstable. Using the new jewel, Tanya climbed to over 6,000 meters in the sky, where her gear started shaking from instability. The observing scientists allowed her to come back down, but the lead scientist refused. Tanya screamed at the deranged man that his genius contraption would get her killed, but he insisted that his gadget was perfect, and she was the one who couldn't use it properly. In the end, she was forced to use an emergency safety feature, which finally stabilized the gear. However, when Tanya finally relaxed, the prototype suddenly blew up in her face again. She stomped away from the testing ground, enraged by the lead scientist's stubborn attitude. The crazy old man followed her around, insisting that his rubbish invention was actually a revolutionary piece of equipment. He asked Tanya to make it work, but she refused to do anything unless he fixed his gadget. Tired of being the mad scientist's crash test dummy, she sent a transfer request to the higher-ups so she could actually be treated with respect on the front lines. Later, the higher-ups felt guilty about sending a child to the forefront, but since it was Tanya's personal request, they agreed. At night, Tanya was celebrating after learning that the mad scientist's project got cancelled. In that moment, Being X appeared in front of her, taking the form of a doll. Ever since he sent Tanya to this world, he expected her to develop faith after experiencing the harsh realities of war. However, since she still remained completely faithless, he declared that he would give her a miracle. Tanya mocked Being X and knocked the doll off her desk, saying that miracles are just unexplained phenomena. However, he remained confident that she would soon change her mind. The next day, Tanya woke up and found a strange note on her desk. She was called over by the mad scientist again, who had a new prototype for her to try. As Tanya flew up with the prototype, it started to become unstable again. This time, the mad scientist reassured her that their project would succeed. He claimed that God appeared in his dream and inspired him towards a solution, which shocked Tanya. She reminded the scientist that he's an atheist. But for some reason, he became a complete fanatic and told her that they must believe in God from now on. As Tanya's jewel started going out of control, she tried to use the safety feature to shut it off. However, she was shocked upon realizing that the scientist had removed the safety from it. Without the feature to shut it off, endless mana poured into the jewel, fusing the 4 computational cores that it was built with. As Tanya braced herself for another violent explosion, time stopped in front of her. Being X appeared before her, claiming that he had performed a miracle on her jewel. After saying that she must pray to him every time she wants to use the jewel, he resumed time again. Suddenly, the color of Tanya's eyes changed, and she subconsciously chanted a prayer, which stabilized her jewel and allowed her to fly higher than ever. Although Tanya was surprised by its abilities, she knew that the cursed jewel would force her to pray to the evil being X. In the present, she continues to fight with the same jewel, cursing being X for forcing her against her will. Meanwhile, the higher-ups discuss her recent achievements. General Kurt thinks Tanya is the perfect ace, but Eric feels worried that she'll do something crazy with her attitude. However, Hans tells him that they've already made their decision for her. Back in the camp, Officer Victoria rests, exhausted on her desk. As she complains about wanting to go back home, Tanya overhears her, so she instantly straightens up in terror. Victoria thinks it's over for her, but Tanya actually gives her a transfer offer to leave the battlefield and handle office matters. Hearing this, Victoria is stunned for a moment, so Tanya wonders if she still wants to be on the battlefield. She quickly recovers and accepts the offer, but quietly asks Tanya if she's going to get shelled in her office like Harold and Cursed. Tanya declines to answer her question and leaves, so Victoria feels grateful for her life-changing opportunity. Later, Tanya receives a promotion to the lieutenant rank, with orders to attend the military academy again. She grins smugly, feeling happy that she can relax in the university for the time being. Then, Island comes over to say goodbye. Tanya returns his greeting, acting like she's guilty for leaving the unit. Island wonders if this is why she also recommended that Victoria go home. Inwardly, Tanya feels happy since she simply wanted to look like a caring officer by helping Victoria. Then, both of them salute each other before Tanya leaves. Back in the capital, Hans wonders how the war situation is, so Kurt tells him that it's in a stalemate. He explains that their main force is unable to adapt to so many missions, so the military requires a new special forces unit that can adapt to the changing battlefields. Meanwhile, as Tanya sits in her train, feeling giddy about her relaxing upcoming days, Hans wonders if he should pick her as part of the urgently needed rapid response team. Tanya settles into her new life, absolutely thrilled to wake up in the peaceful capital. She strolls through lively streets to her university, desperate to leave the muddy, hellish trenches of the front line in her rearview mirror. In her mind, a military university is the ultimate safe haven. With her previous experience on the battlefield, she quickly establishes herself as a prodigy. When a classmate fumbles a question on the military code of conduct, Tanya steps up and delivers a flawless, textbook answer that leaves the professor speechless. Unfortunately, it seems like wherever Tanya goes, the battlefield continues to haunt her. After class, while other students relax, Johann catches Tanya meticulously dismantling and cleaning her rifle. She casually tells him it is just a precaution against traps, leaving him bewildered. In reality, her paranoia is in overdrive. Since things are going so smoothly, she thinks that being X is setting her up for a trap, so she wants to be ready to shoot him squarely in the face. Later, Tanya heads to the library, where the massive bookshelves serve as a cruel reminder that she is, essentially, a dwarf. As the poor kid struggles to reach a book, a kind man pulls it down for her. To her surprise, it is General Hans von Zetter. He praises her academic brilliance and invites her for a private chat. Ignoring her status as a young student, Hans asks for her honest opinion on the current war. Wanting to make a good impression on him, she drops her innocent facade. Tanya predicts that the conflict will inevitably spiral into a world war. She addresses the elephant in the room, that the Empire is a rapidly expanding superpower, picking fights left and right. Even if they crush their main rival, the Republic, the surrounding nations will inevitably panic and form an alliance against them. Their sheer strength has painted a massive target on their back. Impressed by her analysis, Hans asks her for a survival strategy. Tanya initially suggests diplomacy, but knowing that the Empire's higher-ups are obsessed with global dominance, she changes her answer. She proposes a new doctrine, a highly mobile, rapid response mage battalion. Since a handful of aerial mages can obliterate thousands of traditional infantrymen, a specialized strike force could easily control the battlefield. Hans nods and asks her for the numbers. Without realizing she is accidentally writing her own death warrant, Tanya suggests a small battalion. Hans accepts her strategy and orders her to draft a formal proposal, leaving him to ponder the future of the Empire. When Kurt hands Tanya's anonymous thesis to Eric, the strategist's blood runs cold. He immediately recognizes the ruthless, calculated logic of the author. Meanwhile, Tanya is sipping coffee at a cafe, blissfully dreaming of a safe, rear-echelon career. Captain Uger interrupts her piece, asking an obvious question. Why did a child like her join the military? Tanya immediately plays the sympathy card. She claims her soldier father died for the fatherland, and her mother abandoned her. Uger, who just became a father to a baby girl, is instantly crushed by guilt at the thought of a child fighting his battles. Tanya smiles warmly, insisting that soldiers like them must fight so other children can live in peace. As Uger leaves in tears, Tanya's expression freezes into a sinister grin. Her innocent orphan act just secured her a highly influential friend in the logistics department, whom she can use later. Back at headquarters, Hans pitches the rapid response force to the generals, using Tanya's brilliant thesis to silence any doubts. Soon after, Tanya is called into a post-graduation meeting with Hans and another high-ranking official. She is offered a platter of easy, non-combat roles, but Hans slides her a different piece of paper. Without warning, he flat-out appoints her as the commander of the new mobile mage task force. Tanya is internally screaming, realizing she just fudged her life harder than a man's would in the morning. She protests, saying a low-ranked soldier doesn't deserve to lead an important battalion. In response, Hans promises her a swift promotion. Realizing she cannot refuse, Tanya hatches a devious backup plan. She decides to make the recruitment standards so impossibly strict that nobody passes, hoping to force the military to scrap the project. However, her misery only increases when the bubbly Victoria suddenly barges into her office, assigned as her new subordinate. For some reason, the higher-ups, in their infinite wisdom, decided that their ace mage needs a dedicated assistant. Victoria immediately starts organizing paperwork and being agonizingly helpful. For a fiercely independent introvert like Tanya, this is an absolute nightmare. Her perfectly quiet sanctuary is now compromised by an eager subordinate she never asked for. Meanwhile, the Empire is surrounded by hostile nations and is slowly getting bled dry on multiple fronts. To turn the tide, the command desperately needs the Rapid Response Aerial Mage Battalion, so soldiers flock to apply for this prestigious unit. Unfortunately, their recruiter, Tanya, has a hidden agenda. She deliberately sets the physical and magical standards impossibly high, rejecting almost everyone in hopes of stalling the battalion's creation so she can stay off the battlefield. Soon enough, General Hans sees right through her schemes. He politely but firmly corners her, demanding she lower her standards and get the task force operational immediately. Trapped, Tanya agrees, but she negotiates for 1 full month of exclusive training time. Since it sounds reasonable, Hans agrees, but Tanya secretly plans on making the boot camp so incredibly traumatizing that the recruits voluntarily quit. Having survived Tanya's command before, Victoria knows exactly what is coming. With a genuinely demonic grin, Tanya kicks off the training by raining live artillery shells directly onto her own recruits. The bewildered soldiers quickly realize this is not a drill. For their first task ever, they have to dodge explosions for the next 36 hours just to survive. But Tanya is only getting started. Once the artillery stops, she strips them of their magical flight gear and forces them on a brutal, manual hike through a treacherous mountain pass. Just as their physical exhaustion peaks, the mountain rumbles. A massive avalanche rushes towards them, burying the entire squad under tons of freezing snow. When the snow clears, a few soldiers pass out from the sheer trauma, but Tanya simply revives them on the spot with healing magic. She mocks them mercilessly, taunting them to drop out so she can go back to her cozy desk. However, her reverse psychology massively backfires. Angered by her taunting, the soldiers decide to keep going just to spite her. To her absolute horror, not a single soldier quits. They push through the agonizing month, officially graduating as her new elite battalion. By trying to make them quit, Tanya has accidentally created a squad of unyielding super soldiers. A few days later, Tanya slumps over her office desk, suffering from her own success. The peace does not last long before Eric walks in with fresh deployment orders. The Empire is getting squeezed again. and command needs Tanya's new battalion to march southeast immediately. Tanya desperately asks for more time to train her soldiers, hoping to delay the inevitable, but Eric shuts her down. He advises her to brush up on the Dacian language before she deploys. When Tanya dives into the intelligence reports on the Dacian forces, her foul mood does a complete 180. Dacia is a country stubbornly stuck in the 19th century. More importantly, they possess absolutely zero aerial mage forces and are marching into a modern war with heavily outdated tactics. Tanya's eyes light up with predatory glee, thinking she's gotten a bunch of fish in a barrel. She casually informs her squad that they will be using the Dacian army for live target practice. Tanya's battalion arrives at the southeast battlefield to find the Dacian army lined up on the ground like toy soldiers. Some of her rookies tense up when the enemy infantry raises their rifles to the sky. Tanya just laughs, knowing that standard infantry bullets cannot even reach their cruising altitude. She leads the charge, effortlessly obliterating the enemy lines from above before swarming their main command base. They neutralize the guards in minutes, easily surrounding the survivors. Tanya leaves the enemy commander alive just long enough to snatch all their crucial intelligence reports. When her mages ask for their next rally point, she points straight toward the Dacian capital. The enemy is so hopelessly incompetent that she decides to strike the heart of their nation. Once they arrive in the airspace above the peaceful capital city, her subordinates hesitate. They nervously remind her that bombing a civilian hub without a formal declaration of war explicitly breaks international law. Tanya, however, knows the legal rulebook inside and out. International law dictates they must issue a warning first, but it never specifies how that warning must sound. Deciding to use this loophole, she grabs a broadcasting speaker. Instead of a formal, booming military declaration, she uses her literal, high-pitched child voice to warn the city of an impending military strike. Naturally, the civilians down below assume it is just a bizarre radio prank. Nobody takes the adorable voice seriously, and no one evacuates, having officially checked the legal warning box. Tanya drops the innocent act. She gives the green light, and her mages rain destruction down on Dacia's armories and crucial military warehouses. Her soldiers are genuinely shocked by how easily they dismantle an entire nation's military infrastructure. With the capital neutralized and the mission a sweeping success, Tanya orders her unit to pack up and head home, having just executed the most perfectly legal war crime in history. Word spreads fast across the Empire's military high command. Tanya von de Gurachav has completely steamrolled the nation of Dacia. With their eastern border finally secure, the Empire can breathe a brief sigh of relief. However, in a multi-front war, removing one enemy just means you can look at the other threats breathing down your neck. The biggest headache right now is the Entente alliance up in the freezing north. General Hans points out that the brutal winter snow is stalling their supply lines, and the Empire's resources are dangerously close to running dry. Kurt, however, sees a straightforward solution to this logistical nightmare. If Tanya's newly formed elite battalion can casually dismantle an entire country on their first outing, they can surely break the deadlock in the north. Without a second thought, the High Command issues the deployment orders. When Tanya announces the sudden transfer to her squad, the mages are understandably confused about why they are being bounced across the continent so quickly. But in the military, orders are orders, and they pack their bags for the freezing tundra. Walking back to her quarters, Tanya's strategic mind works in overdrive. She casually asks her trusted assistant, Victoria, if she feels something is off about this whole geopolitical situation. From a purely logical standpoint, the Entente alliance is nowhere near powerful enough to threaten the massive empire on its own. They should have surrendered by now. Tanya quickly deduces the hidden truth. The Entente is just a proxy. Global superpowers like the Republic and the Allied Kingdom must be secretly funneling weapons and resources to the smaller nations to bleed the Empire dry. Tanya's expression darkens. A global alliance perfectly orchestrating the Empire's downfall is too neat, too perfectly designed to make her life miserable. She realizes that being X, the self-proclaimed deity who reincarnated her into this war-torn hellscape, is actively manipulating world events just to mess with her. Meanwhile, inside the Entente Alliance's military headquarters, the reality of Tanya's deduction plays out. The Entente leaders quietly discuss their precarious situation. They are fully aware that they are heavily relying on the Republic and the Allied Kingdom for survival. Some officers nervously question whether depending on foreign superpowers is a good idea, but their leader bluntly shuts them down. They are pawns on a grand chessboard, and they simply have no other choice. Fast forward to the snowy northern front, where the Empire's standard mages are dropping like flies. The Entente forces seem endless, constantly replacing their fallen troops. Just as things look hopeless for the Empire, a squadron of enemy bombers darkens the sky. An Imperial commander desperately radios for emergency anti-air support, only to be told he has to wait for reinforcements. He knows that waiting means his entire unit will be wiped out. But suddenly, the radio crackles with a different frequency. Operating under the ominous callsign Pixie, Tanya's elite mage battalion arrives on the scene. Back in the communications room, Imperial strategists scramble to send fighter jets to support the mages. However, Tanya firmly tells command to call off the jets, since her mages are strong, independent soldiers who do not need traditional air support. The strategists are absolutely stunned when they check the radar. They watch as Tanya's squad casually climbs to extreme altitudes that only advanced aircraft should be able to reach. Up in the freezing sky, Tanya's forces clash with the Entente mages in a brutal dogfight. To keep her troops motivated, she flashes a sadistic grin and makes a sudden announcement over the comms. They are not getting any backup. She also announces that whichever platoon performs the worst today has to pay the entire bar tab for their victory party. Nothing motivates a soldier quite like the threat of a massive financial loss. Fueled by the sheer terror of paying for food, the mages fiercely charge the enemy lines. Seeing her squad perfectly handle the enemy mages, Tanya delegates the grunt work to Victoria. She leaves her in charge of wiping out the remaining infantry, while she personally handles an incoming enemy bomber fleet. The enemy bomber pilots are completely caught off guard when a tiny, blonde girl flies up to match their cruising altitude. Panicking, the gunners desperately try to shoot her out of the sky. Tanya dodges the heavy machine gun fire effortlessly, lands directly on the wing of the lead bomber, plants a cluster of explosives, and dives off. The crew can only stare in sheer horror as their plane is instantly ripped apart in a fiery explosion. With their formation broken, the remaining bombers scatter like frightened chickens. Tanya actually groans out loud. The enemy is so painfully predictable that she is getting bored. Deciding to wrap things up, she charges a massive, overpowered magic spell. Then, she releases a blinding beam of pure energy that rapidly bounces from plane to plane, completely obliterating the entire fleet in seconds. Tanya touches down in the snowy wreckage, hoping to scavenge some useful intelligence from the downed bombers. Most of the pilots are already dead, but suddenly, one of the charred corpses twitches, stands up, and turns to face her. Tanya instantly raises her rifle and blasts the zombie-like figure, but the corpse just laughs at her. Through the dead pilot's mouth, Being X speaks. The fake deity smugly announces that he has rigged the entire geopolitical landscape against her. The whole world will soon wage war on the Empire, all to break her stubborn, atheistic pride. Unfazed, Tanya glares at the divine meat puppet, turns on her heel, and walks away. Miles away from the wreckage, a covert intelligence unit from the Allied Kingdom has been quietly observing the battle. They are frantically collecting data, terrified to confirm that the Republic's terrifying rumors about a Devil of the Rhine are actually true. Suddenly, their magical sensors go crazy. Tanya is emitting a massive mana signature. They wonder what she could possibly be targeting, only to realize with absolute dread that she is aiming directly at them. Despite being miles away, Tanya locks onto their exact coordinates and unleashes a devastating long-range bombardment. She wipes their entire hidden outpost off the map, instantly vaporizing the spies along with all their gathered intelligence. When Victoria flies down to congratulate her commander on another flawless victory, she finds Tanya completely distracted, silently fuming over her ongoing feud with Being X. The ripples of Tanya's actions spread across the globe. In the shining capital of the Republic, a nervous colonel briefs General Pierre on the Entente Alliance's failing front lines. The colonel begs the general to send actual military support to their struggling allies. General Pierre, however, coldly refuses. He has zero interest in saving the Entente and only cares about using them as a convenient meat shield to slowly drain the Empire's resources. Back at the Imperial capital, Kurt warmly congratulates Tanya for single-handedly turning the tide in the north. But there is no rest for the wicked. He immediately assigns her a new, highly dangerous mission to take out a heavily fortified enemy defensive camp. Normally, Tanya would complain about being sent back to the frontline meat grinder. This time, however, she remembers Being X's smug declaration of war. Just to spite the petty deity, she gladly accepts the orders, silently vowing to destroy anyone who threatens her comfortable life. In the Entente Alliance, Colonel Anson says goodbye to his daughter before his deployment for war, saying that he's the best father ever. His daughter, Mary, wishes him good luck. Before leaving, Anson smiles and tells her to look after her mother. Later, a fellow soldier hands him a Christmas gift sent by Mary. Anson opens the unusually large box and is completely bewildered to find a beautiful, high-quality rifle inside. His squadmate casually points out that his daughter probably just wants to help him survive the war. Meanwhile, back at the Empire's headquarters, the higher-ups have hit a strategic deadlock. The older, stubborn generals sit Tanya down at the war table and propose a massive, brute force offensive straight into the enemy's front lines. Tanya immediately shoots the idea down. She coldly points out that their soldiers are completely exhausted, and throwing them into a frontal meat grinder will just waste manpower. A northern general furiously asks if a child is seriously questioning the Empire's grand strategy. But Tanya refuses to back down. Dismissed from the room, she walks out with her head held high. Later, Tanya meets up with Generals Kurt and Eric in a private office. She bluntly asks Kurt why he is letting the Boomer generals launch an attack that will obviously drain their remaining resources. Kurt smirks and tells her to ignore the politics since he just wants her tactical opinion on the frontline assault. Tanya's mind goes into overdrive. She thinks out loud, noting that a massive frontline push makes zero sense logically. An impenetrable naval fortress. He feels slightly bored guarding a rear echelon base, but the heavy artillery cannons lining the coast make it clear why this place matters. He watches young recruits train, feeling a heavy pang of guilt that kids are fighting this brutal war, but he vows to protect them. High above the clouds, Tanya and her elite mage battalion prepare to drop from their transport planes. The plan is simple but dangerous. She splits the team in two. Tanya will act as the tank, drawing all the enemy aggro, while the rest of her squad focuses entirely on destroying the massive coastal defense guns. She gives her assistant, Victoria, strict orders to retreat if communications drop. Her soldiers joke about using their tiny commander as a loud, explosive fire alarm, and then they dive into the freezing air. Down below, Anson and his men get a sudden report that a patrol ship has gone dark. Before they can even investigate, multiple communication channels go completely silent, immediately followed by the deafening roar of explosions. The Imperial mages descend like a plague of locusts. Instead of targeting barracks or command centers, they strictly target the mounted anti-ship cannons. Anson is momentarily confused by this highly specific targeting, but he quickly mobilizes his mages to intercept. As Anson's forces swarm in, Victoria radios Tanya with a proximity alert. Tanya orders her squad to ignore the defenders and keep smashing the cannons, confidently flying off on her own to handle the incoming army. Back in the Empire's capital, the tension is suffocating. Eric sweats bullets as he watches the tactical map. Kurt grimly reminds him of the stakes. The Empire has secretly deployed a massive naval armada. If Tanya's squad fails to silence those coastal guns in time, the Entente will blow the Empire's fleet out of the water, resulting in the most devastating and embarrassing military defeat in Imperial history. Back at the fjord, Tanya treats the enemy mages like practice targets. She violently weaves through the air, drawing all their fire while her subordinates dismantle the coastal guns one by one. Anson watches his men drop like flies under Tanya's ruthless magical barrage. Then, he gets a good look at her face. Cold dread washes over him as he recognizes the Devil of the Rhine from a previous bloodbath. Fueled by pure rage, Anson unleashes a massive barrage of magic, screaming as he charges the tiny demon terrorizing his country. Tanya easily deflects the volley and turns to face the furious commander. Just as they clash, the final coastal gun is destroyed. On cue, the massive Imperial naval fleet emerges from the fog, unleashing a devastating artillery bombardment on the defenseless sea base. The Entente forces are completely powerless as heavy naval shells shatter their fortress. Knowing the base is lost, Anson realizes he only has one objective left: kill Tanya. Remembering his daughter waiting at home, he finds a burst of superhuman resolve. He charges Tanya with everything he has left. Both soldiers mutter a final prayer to their god, but unfortunately for Anson, the power of friendship and family values means absolutely nothing to a reincarnated sociopath. Tanya gracefully dodges his strike and buries her combat knife deep into him, sending a brutal blood fountain spraying into the air. As Anson's life fades, Tanya notices the gorgeous, high-end rifle strapped to him, the Christmas gift from Mary. She snatches the rifle for herself like a loot drop, letting the defeated father plummet into the freezing ocean below. With the coastal defenses neutralized, the Imperial fleet effortlessly captures the sea base. It is a flawless strategic victory. Back at the Entente headquarters, the higher-ups are drowning in absolute misery. Their leader takes a deep hit of copium, trying to argue that the war is not technically over. But the rest of the room knows the grim truth. Losing the fjord means the Empire can now crush them from multiple sides. Meanwhile, Imperial generals Hans and Kurt celebrate their tactical masterpiece. The decoy worked, the naval invasion succeeded, and the end of the Northern War is finally in sight. But miles away, in a quiet, snowy village, a radio broadcast reports the complete destruction of the Ors Fjord. Mary Sue sits by the radio, her eyes widening in horror. Knowing her father was stationed there, the devastating reality sets in. She buries her face into her mother's chest and begins to sob violently. The Empire just won a massive battle, but in the process, Tanya has unknowingly created a deeply personal, terrifyingly motivated new enemy. Another day, another bloody battlefield. Tanya and her elite mage battalion are currently stuck in the trenches, dodging heavy artillery from both the enemy and their own side. Friendly fire is not actually friendly, and the Imperial artillery does not care if Tanya's squad is in the blast radius. After grinding the enemy infantry into dust and swatting a few enemy mages out of the sky, the squad finally earns a brief moment of respite. Back at the encampment, the soldiers relax in their tents over a hot dinner. Lieutenant Weiss casually discusses the chain of command and potential promotions with the rookie, Grants. Grants nervously points at Victoria, wondering if they are plotting to steal her job. Weiss just laughs. In reality, no one wants to deal with the paperwork she handles for their terrifying tiny commander anyway. Suddenly, an informant rushes into the camp demanding to see Tanya. Since she is off resting, Weiss intercepts the message, and the news is an absolute geopolitical nightmare. The city of Erin, a crucial logistical hub recently conquered by the Empire, has suddenly launched a massive, violent rebellion. The citizens have taken up arms, sabotaged the railway infrastructure, and cut off the Empire's vital supply lines. Even worse, the Republic deliberately armed the rebels and snuck their own mages into the city to help retake the territory. Tanya immediately reports to command to discuss this crisis. The higher-ups assign her a grim mission: retake Erin at all costs. There is a massive catch, though. International law strictly prohibits the indiscriminate slaughter of civilians. The Empire has to issue a formal warning and allow an evacuation before launching an attack. However, if the civilians refuse to leave and actively resist, they lose their protected status and officially become enemy combatants. Tanya practically giggles at the idea of civilians foolishly picking up guns in a superpower proxy war, mocking their fatal stupidity. One of the older officers quickly silences her, deeply disturbed by her total lack of empathy. To the traditional generals, slaughtering civilians is a tragic, necessary evil. But Tanya considers it pest control. She gathers her battalion and briefs them on the grim reality of their new mission. They are flying into an urban war zone. They will issue the mandatory evacuation warning. But if the civilians stay, they are to be treated as hostile soldiers and ruthlessly eliminated. This chilling order violently shakes Grants. As a fresh recruit, the thought of massacring innocent families breaks his brain. He tries to protest to Weiss, horrified by Tanya's absolute lack of a moral compass. Weiss, who has survived this long by knowing exactly when to keep his mouth shut, firmly tells the rookie to suck it up and follow orders. The battalion descends upon Erin. Down below, Republican officers spot the Imperial mages and order their militia to open fire. Tanya and her squad are immediately forced to weave through narrow alleyways and tight city blocks, dodging sniper fire from windows and magical blasts from hidden alleys. During a skirmish, Grants watches in horror as Weiss takes a nasty hit and starts bleeding heavily. Grants manages to pull him to safety, but Weiss is entirely out of commission. Without missing a beat, Tanya orders Weiss to evacuate for medical treatment and instantly promotes a shell-shocked Grants to second in command. Tanya regroups the squad and locates the main pocket of Republican mages hiding deep inside a heavily fortified building. Instead of charging in blindly, she decides to exploit the rulebook. She uses a loudspeaker spell to issue the legally required evacuation warning, ordering all civilians to surrender the Republican officers and flee. Naturally, the rebellious citizens completely ignore the tiny voice echoing from the sky. Even worse, the Republic mages use the civilians as human shields, staying completely silent. Tanya knows exactly what she is doing. Because the civilians ignored the warning, they are no longer citizens, they are enemy combatants. Tanya nods to her communications officer. High above, the Imperial heavy artillery receives the green light. They rain absolute hellfire down on Eren. Massive explosive shells level entire city blocks. As buildings collapse and the sky turns to ash, the families watch their beloved city get reduced to a burning crater. The Republican mage commander can only watch from hiding, as the Imperial forces completely obliterate the city, perfectly violating yet another Geneva Convention. When the dust settles, Imperial infantry moves in to secure the ruins. However, Tanya receives a report that surviving Republic mages have disguised themselves and are hiding among a group of captured civilian refugees. She prepares to wipe out the entire group just to be safe. Hearing this, Grants completely snaps. He steps in front of Tanya, crying and begging her to stop. He pleads for the lives of the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. Tanya coldly points out that there are no innocents in a war zone. She gestures toward a young, surviving boy in the crowd who is glaring at them with pure, unadulterated hatred. If they let these people live, they will just grow up to become the Empire's next wave of enemies. Grant still tries to protest, so Tanya brutally knocks him to the ground. She forcefully reminds him that soldiers are not allowed the luxury of a conscience. Their job is to harden their hearts and ensure the Empire's survival, no matter how many bodies it takes. Testing his resolve, she shoves a rifle into his hands and orders him to execute the prisoners. Grants is paralyzed, haunted by the brutal memories of the war, but under Tanya's piercing gaze, his morality finally breaks. With tears streaming down his face, the rookie raises the rifle and pulls the trigger. Meanwhile, back in the safety of the Imperial capital, Eric is having a bureaucratic panic attack. He hands General Hans a dense academic thesis detailing the exact legal loopholes required to bomb a civilian city without technically breaking international law. Eric nervously asks if this was the playbook used to justify the massacre at Eren. Hans smiles maliciously and nods. Eric points out the author of the paper, Tanya herself. Hans praises her terrifying genius, eager to put her sociopathic talents to even greater use. Far away from the burning ruins of Eren, a doctor checks on a severely injured patient in a quiet military hospital. It is Colonel Anson Su. Against all logical odds, he survived his brutal duel with Tanya at the fjord and washed up on the shore of a lake. The doctor remarks on his miraculous survival, but Anson does not care about his physical wounds. He stares blankly at the ceiling, vividly remembering a blinding, golden light he saw while sinking into the freezing water. When the curious doctor asks what he saw, Anson's eyes narrow with clarity. He claims he saw God, who has given him a new purpose, to hunt down and destroy the little devil named Tanya. On a transport ship heading back to the capital, Tanya casually bumps into Ugur. He is looking unusually cheerful, warmly thanking her for recommending him for a cozy desk job in the rear. However, he also leaks some crucial intel. The Empire is intentionally withdrawing its forces from the main front line. Hearing this, Tanya's brilliant strategic mind immediately goes to work. If the Empire is not retreating, they are setting a continent-scale trap. The higher-ups want to lure the enemy deep into vulnerable territory, but Tanya knows that her elite battalion will be used as the bloody, screaming bait. Back at Imperial High Command, the tension is thick enough to cut with a combat knife. The old guard generals stubbornly argue for a brute force push to hold the line, completely ignoring the reality that their supply lines are running on fumes. General Hans politely interrupts to drop some hard truth. He proposes a strategy shift. Stop trying to win a slow war of attrition. To survive this world war, they need to execute a single, decapitating strike that destroys the enemy's main command structure, ending the conflict in one fell swoop. General Kurt backs him up, detailing the master plan. They will fake a desperate retreat to bait the Republic's army out of their heavily fortified trenches. Once the enemy advances, their command centers will be left wide open. Fast forward to the Rhine Theater, which is currently a human chopping block. Tanya's mage battalion is acting as the rear guard, trying to convince the Republic that the Empire is throwing away its forces in a desperate final stand. The Republic bites the bait hard, aggressively retaliating with heavy anti-air flak and rocket barrages. Hearing reports of heavy casualties across the lines, Imperial HQ gives Tanya the green light to fall back. However, Tanya knows that pulling out too early will make the retreat look suspiciously quick. Stubbornly, she holds the line, dodging lethal explosions to sell the illusion. When a radio operator from HQ awkwardly signs off by wishing her God's protection, the mere mention of the G-word distracts Tanya with pure, unfiltered rage. Her momentary lapse in focus nearly gets her blasted out of the sky by a stray artillery shell. While Tanya's squad draws all the enemy aggro, the main Imperial infantry successfully evacuates the death zone. With the trap set, the mages finally pull back to a makeshift medical camp to lick their wounds. Inside a quiet tent, Grant sits with Victoria. He is visibly haunted, still carrying the heavy trauma of executing civilians during the massacre at Erin. Victoria gently reminds him of a core military policy. The commanding officer legally and morally shoulders all the blame for their unit's actions. The realization hits Grant like a physical blow. He remembers Tanya physically forcing him to pull the trigger. She did not do it just to be cruel. She did it to take the entire moral burden of a war crime onto her own shoulders. In his eyes, Tanya might be a sociopath, but she protects her own. Grant quietly thanks Victoria for helping him find a shred of peace in the madness. Later, Tanya meets with Eric to discuss the next phase of Hans's grand strategy. The Empire has been aggressively leaking fake propaganda, pretending its military is collapsing to lure the Republic forward. Eric reveals the true objective. Tanya's squad needs to launch a surprise decapitation strike directly on the Republic's heavily guarded headquarters. Tanya points out that bypassing layers of heavy anti-air defenses without getting shredded is mathematically impossible unless they have a secret superweapon. In response, Shujal, the Empire's resident mad scientist, rears his ugly head. He excitedly leads Tanya and Erich to a secure hangar, proudly unveiling his latest abomination: experimental, high-speed mini-jets. Shujal happily explains that these metal tubes will blast straight through the sound barrier, entirely bypassing enemy radar and anti-air guns. When Tanya points out that the sheer G-force and shockwaves from breaking the sound barrier will pulverize a human body, Shujal just shrugs and tells her to use magic. Knowing how reliable the madman's inventions are, Tanya realizes she has just been assigned to pilot a supersonic flying coffin. Across the devastated trenches, the Republic's army cautiously advances into the abandoned Imperial territory. Back at Republic HQ, General Pierre looks at the tactical map and smiles greedily. Assuming the Empire is finally broken, he arrogantly orders his staff to start preparing the victory feast. Meanwhile, the Imperial forces are sweating bullets. Grant and Weiss stress over the suicidal rocket mission, wondering how anyone can stay calm, knowing they are about to ride untested explosives into enemy territory. Victoria answers that question by sleeping like a baby in the corner, proving once again that she is simply built differently. Back at High Command, Eric, Hans, and Kurt share a tense, dead silent dinner. They know this insane gamble will either win the war or doom their nation. Launch day arrives. Tanya's squad securely straps into their metal death traps. In a final burst of agonizing irony, Shujal sincerely prays to God for their safe return. Tanya snatches the comms and delivers a fiery, aggressively atheist motivational speech. She orders her squad to rely on their own grit and magical strength, refusing to give an invisible deity any credit for their survival. With the violent crank of a lever, Shujal launches the rockets. Tanya is violently slammed back into her seat, her teeth rattling as the G-force threatens to crush her lungs. She furiously curses being X for turning her dream of a peaceful desk job into a supersonic suicide run. Tearing through the sky at Mach speed, the rockets easily bypass the heavily guarded Republic borders. Once perfectly positioned above the enemy capital, Tanya yanks the ejection lever. The rocket chamber violently detaches, and she gracefully deploys her parachute. Down below, the oblivious Republican guards are suddenly deafened by the roar of high-yield explosions raining from the sky. Out on the freezing ocean, a covert naval vessel from the Allied Kingdom sails quietly toward a Republican port. The Allied Kingdom has historically stayed out of the bloody mainland conflicts, and the officers on board nervously discuss why their government is suddenly meddling in this massive proxy war. Their eyes naturally drift toward the man sitting quietly in the corner, Colonel Anson Sue. Anson is in a deep, meditative trance. Some of the Allied officers whisper, questioning if a defeated Entente commander can really be trusted, but their superior quickly shuts down the doubts. Anson is the one who handed them the highly classified Imperial intelligence needed to make this intervention possible. He is a man fueled by holy vengeance, marching steadily toward a rematch with a certain blonde demon. Meanwhile, Tanya's supersonic infiltration mission hits the ground running. After surviving the agonizing rocket drop, she lands deep behind enemy lines, silently regrouping with her squad. They split up to strike multiple high-value targets at the same time. Back in the Empire's capital, the atmosphere is incredibly toxic. Inside the grand boardroom, the wealthy politicians and old money nobles are throwing a massive, collective tantrum. Because the military faked a massive retreat from the front lines, the Empire's precious industrial zones are currently exposed to potential attacks. The nobles furiously accuse the military generals of reckless incompetence, terrified that a prolonged war will exhaust their resources and bankrupt their factories. Through all the screaming, General Hans just sits there unbothered, ignoring the politicians' whining. He is just waiting for the clock to strike. Deep in Republic territory, Tanya's stealth team quietly breaches their assigned command center, only to find it empty. It is a decoy. A rare moment of panic grips Tanya as she wonders if the Republic has anticipated their strike. She frantically radios her other squads, only to be met with radio silence. But just as the pressure increases, the comms crackle to life. The other squads successfully located the actual headquarters and blew it straight to hell. Right on cue, a breathless messenger bursts into the Imperial boardroom. He loudly announces that the Republic's central military headquarters has just been completely obliterated. The room of angry nobles instantly goes dead silent. Hans's stoic mask finally breaks, and he flashes a terrifying, deeply smug grin. He casually informs the stunned politicians that the military's master plan is only just beginning. With the enemy's brain destroyed, the Empire springs the rest of the trap. On the front lines, Imperial engineers secretly pump massive amounts of volatile, invisible gas into the abandoned trenches, wiring the entire battlefield with hidden detonators. The Republican infantry, completely unaware of the decapitation strike, marches forward to reclaim the abandoned territory, believing they have finally pushed the Empire back. The soldiers relax. One Republican grunt happily pulls out a cigarette to celebrate. His squadmate warns him against it, but he ignores the advice. With a flick of his hands, the spark from the lighter ignites the surrounding gas. A cataclysmic chain reaction erupts and vaporizes the trench line, creating a massive wall of fire that torches the celebrating soldiers in a split second. High above, a surviving Republican mage colonel watches his forces turn to ash. Before the smoke even clears, a massive wave of heavy Imperial tanks and infantry violently breaks through the lines, crushing whatever resistance is left. The colonel frantically tries to radio the capital for orders, but there is only dead air. Filled with dread, he flies back to where his headquarters used to be, only to find a smoking crater surrounded by terrified, leaderless soldiers. At Imperial High Command, Eric happily reports the frontline success. Without their command center to coordinate a retreat, the Republican army is a headless chicken. Kurt grins fiercely, knowing that the Empire is now rapidly surrounding the remaining Republic forces in a massive, inescapable kill box. The next day, Tanya and her squad catch a ride home aboard an Imperial submarine. Her soldiers are cheering and celebrating, though most of them are deeply confused about how they went from losing the war to suddenly winning it overnight. Tanya steps up to the chalkboard and explains everything like a smug college professor. She explains the revolving door tactic. They lured the enemy in, cut off their head, and locked the door behind them. Hearing that total victory is practically guaranteed, the squad erupts into cheers. Up on the surface, the merciless Imperial tanks continue to mop up the fleeing Republican remnants. Shortly after, Tanya's battalion takes to the sky for what she believes is the final cleanup operation of the war. They just need to fly in, snipe a few high-value targets, and clock out. Tanya is riding an incredible, euphoric high. She genuinely believes the World War is ending. Her cozy desk job is finally secured, and she has definitively beaten being X at his own twisted game. She even cracks a joke, promising to buy the entire squad lifetime free meals if they make it home today. Unfortunately, it is all a catastrophic jinx. Suddenly, Lieutenant Weiss's magical radar spikes. HQ frantically radios Tanya with a priority alert. A squad of completely unregistered mages has just entered the airspace. They are not Republican forces. They are from the Allied Kingdom. Tanya's eyes widen as she realizes the global superpower has secretly entered the war. She tightens her grip on her rifle, preparing to issue combat orders. But before she can even finish turning around, a high-caliber magical sniper round violently rips through the sky, blasting Grants clean out of the air. In an instant, Tanya's grand illusion of a peaceful conclusion completely evaporates. The man behind the trigger is none other than Colonel Anson. He did not just survive his fatal wound at the Ors Fjord. He has returned as a divinely buffed raid boss, backed by a fresh squadron of Allied Kingdom mages. Realizing they have entirely lost the element of surprise, Tanya frantically barks orders to her squad. They scramble out of their cruising formation and instantly lock into a tight, close-quarters combat stance. The Allied mages smugly assume they'll win easily, but they severely underestimate the Devil of the Rhine. Instead of falling back, Tanya aggressively charges straight into the enemy formation. She flawlessly weaves through their magical crossfire, instantly vaporizing several Allied mages before they even realize she is in striking distance. However, Anson is playing by a completely different set of rules. Seeing his squad get shredded, he whips out a devastating trench shotgun. In the geopolitical rulebook of this world, Deploying a weapon that causes unnecessary suffering is a literal war crime. Of course, international law conveniently does nothing to help Tanya when a divinely powered madman starts blasting her subordinates out of the sky. The sheer chaos of the ambush shocks Lieutenant Weiss. Seeing his squadmates drop, Weiss abandons all tactical logic and foolishly charges into the open. The enemy mages immediately lock onto him, charging a massive, concentrated spell designed to erase his existence. Tanya groans internally. To save her reckless lieutenant, she has absolutely no choice but to activate the Elenium Type 95, the cursed magical jewel that only functions when she actively prays to being X. Swallowing her immense pride, she forces out a desperate prayer to the deity she despises. A terrifying golden barrier erupts around her, deflecting the lethal barrage and pulling Weiss back from the brink of death. But there is no time to breathe. Anson fiercely intercepts her, launching a high-speed, relentless pursuit. Fueled by his own holy plot armor, Anson matches Tanya's insane aerial agility perfectly. Weiss tries to offer covering fire, but the two commanders are moving at such breakneck speeds that he cannot land a single shot without risking friendly fire. The high-speed chase eventually leads to a mid-air grapple. Tanya manages to land a solid strike, but Anson completely ignores the pain and firmly grabs her arm. Cold dread washes over Tanya as she finally recognizes his face from the naval base. Suddenly, Anson's eyes glow with a terrifying, unearthly light as he begins praying aloud. Being X starts directly funneling energy into him. Tanya thrashes wildly, her mind racing as she realizes this petty deity is literally hijacking a grieving father to hold her in place. Just as Anson prepares to deliver a point-blank execution, a perfectly aimed sniper round rips through his shoulder, breaking his iron grip. Victoria, ever the reliable assistant, is the one behind this ultimate clutch save. Getting some distance from her enemy, Tanya swiftly draws her weapon, the elegant hunting rifle that Mary Sue gifted her father for Christmas. In a brutal twist of poetic irony, Tanya points the daughter's gift directly at the father's face and pulls the trigger. As a fountain of blood erupts into the air, Anson falls back. But the stubborn old man refuses to go quietly. In a final, desperate act of martyrdom, he lunges forward, pulling Tanya into a terrifying suicide hug as a massive explosion engulfs them both. The surviving allied mages assume the commander is dead and frantically retreat. However, as the smoke clears, the Imperial soldiers erupt into cheers. Tanya hovers completely unscathed, protected by her own magical shields. The battle is finally over. Even Grants, though heavily injured, has survived to see the victory. Down below, history is made. The Imperial ground troops march triumphantly into the Republic's shining capital. The Republic officially surrenders its most important city, and the Empire explodes into a nationwide celebration. In the grand halls of the Imperial capital, politicians and military generals pop bottles. The greedy nobles are thrilled when the military leadership assures them they have no intention of seizing political control over the newly conquered lands. The bureaucrats immediately begin carving up the territory, drafting endless plans for new infrastructure and resource management. To them, the war is functionally over. Meanwhile, Tanya visits a conquered church in the city. She stares up at a grand statue of God, her eyes brimming with sheer, mocking arrogance. She genuinely believes she has checkmated being X. However, as she walks out onto the street, she overhears a group of local children fighting. One bruised child glares at the others and screams, "I'll never forgive you." Those simple words freeze Tanya in her tracks. She realizes that the hatred in the common Republican people cannot vanish just because they signed a piece of paper. Back in her quarters, Tanya obsessively reviews the daily newspaper detailing the Empire's glorious victory. Her mind circles back to the horrifyingly stubborn look in Anson's eyes. Victoria cheerfully interrupts her spiraling thoughts, announcing that the battalion is currently enjoying a well-deserved beach episode. The men are out by the coast, grilling a massive barbecue and celebrating their survival. Victoria smiles, noting how easily the Republic folded. However, Tanya thinks that something is suspicious about how easily it surrendered. She asks Victoria if the Republic actually formally surrendered, or if they simply abandoned the capital. Victoria is confused by her words, but Tanya rushes to the tactical maps without further explanation. She tracks the remnants of the Republic's military movements and realizes the terrifying truth. The enemy forces are not disbanding. They are rapidly converging on a southern naval port. They are preparing a massive fleet to escape to their overseas colonies. In reality, the Republic has not completely surrendered and is currently regrouping for another battle. Tanya storms into the communications tent, frantically radioing Imperial High Command. She begs, pleads, and aggressively demands permission to launch an immediate airstrike on the southern port. She explicitly warns the generals that if they allow the Republic's army to escape, those soldiers will regroup, ally with the other global superpowers, and drag the Empire right back into a bloody conflict. The officer on the other end completely brushes her off. Drunk on their own success, the higher-ups refuse to authorize an attack. They argue that the war is over, the capital is theirs, and chasing fleeing stragglers is a waste of resources. Realizing the bureaucrats are about to doom the entire country, Tanya prepares to go rogue. She plans to take her battalion and wipe out the port under her own authority. But before she can issue the order, Victoria's somber voice cuts through the tent. High Command has explicitly ordered the battalion to stand down and remain at the capital. Going against a direct order now would be outright treason. Tanya slumps back, completely paralyzed by the sheer, staggering incompetence of her superiors. She stares out the window, boiling with absolute frustration. The Empire fought a brutal, agonizing war to secure a lasting peace. And now, out of short-sighted bureaucratic blindness, they are happily letting it slip right through their fingers. Tanya storms into Imperial High Command, absolutely desperate to stop the remnants of the Republic's military from escaping across the ocean. She marches right up to the heavily guarded doors, demanding an immediate audience with Generals Hans or Eric. Unfortunately, the guards completely stonewall her. The top brass is currently throwing a massive victory gala, and they refuse to be interrupted by a mere frontline commander. Just as she is about to lose her temper, Eric descends the nearby staircase and spots her. Seeing the absolute murder in her eyes, he quietly escorts her away from the guards and into a private, soundproof office for a chat. Eric pours Tanya a cup of tea, the silence stretching between them. He sighs and quietly admits that the grand celebrations happening upstairs might be a bit premature. He thanks Tanya for her massive contributions to the Empire's victory, but he wants her honest, unfiltered opinion. Tanya takes a sip of tea and completely shatters his illusion. She bluntly tells him that the Empire has not won the war. They have only scored a temporary victory. Instead of acting like a bunch of drunk frat boys, the military should be deploying every available unit to stomp out the fleeing enemy before they can regroup. Eric immediately goes on the defensive. He reveals that Command knows she almost launched a rogue strike on the fleeing ships. He sharply warns her that she is a soldier, not a dictator, so her insubordination could create a dangerous political division within the military. He explains the strategy board's completely logical reasoning. Since the Republic's capital has fallen, pursuing a broken enemy across the ocean would needlessly burn through the Empire's rapidly depleting funds, resources, and manpower. Rationally speaking, it is time to relax and rebuild. Tanya agrees that Eric's logic is flawless. However, she stands up and delivers a chilling masterclass on human psychology. She tells him that the grand strategists at High Command are brilliant at rational thinking, but they have completely forgotten one crucial, fatal variable. Human beings are fundamentally irrational creatures. When humans are pushed to their breaking point, logic goes out the window. Tanya lists the receipts, drawing from her own brutal experiences. She remembers the disgruntled employee in her past life who murdered her at a train station purely out of spite. She recalls the hateful orphan in the burning ruins of Arad. She reminds Eric of Anson Sue, a man who literally crawled back from the dead just to launch a suicidal revenge attack on her. Hatred defies all logic. Tanya passionately warns Eric that if the Empire leaves even a single ember of hatred alive, those irrational, emotionally driven survivors will eventually burn the entire country to the ground. According to her, they must erase all traces of their enemies now, or they will pay in blood later. Eric stares at her, the chilling realization finally sinking in. Right on cue, the office door violently swings open. A breathless messenger bursts into the room with horrifying news. The Republic's military has officially regrouped in the southern continent. Down in the scorching southern deserts, General Pierre has successfully rallied the fleeing Republican forces. With the backing of overseas colonies, he officially establishes a massive, reorganized military base. Standing before his exhausted troops, he delivers a fiery speech, officially declaring themselves the Free Republic. They will never surrender, and they will fight the cruel empire until their dying breath. When news of this resistance reaches the occupied capital, hope sparks among the conquered citizens, and Tanya's terrifying prediction becomes reality. Back in the Empire, General Kurt smashes a dinner plate against the wall in sheer, unfiltered rage. Sitting across from him, Hans remains terrifyingly calm, but the grim reality is undeniable. They got cocky. By letting the Republic escape, the Empire has allowed them to freely absorb the remnants of the Entente Alliance and the Allied Kingdom into a massive, unified coalition. Worse, the Empire's military is built for European land wars, not overseas desert campaigns. Still, they have one final rapid response task force capable of surviving in the Southern Theater: Tanya's elite mage battalion. When the deployment orders hit Tanya's squad, the atmosphere drops to absolute zero. The soldiers look miserable, realizing their hard-fought peace was a complete lie. Seeing the plummeting morale, Lieutenant Weiss steps up. He jokingly reminds the squad about Tanya's original recruitment flyer, which explicitly warned applicants that they were signing up for the worst job in the world. The squad pauses, looks at each other, and bursts out laughing. They remember the brutal artillery barrages, the freezing avalanches, and the suicidal rocket jumps. Since they survived hell together once, they will gladly do it again. While the Empire scrambles to deploy its forces, a brand new threat quietly emerges in a foreign recruitment office. A young girl sits across from a military official, handing in her application. It is Mary Sue, Anson's deeply grieving daughter. The officer gently reminds her that she is far too young to fight in a brutal global conflict. But Mary is unyielding. She swears to fight for the peace her father died trying to protect, as she tearfully prays to God, vowing to bring down the evil empire. Her eyes suddenly ignite with a blinding, golden light. Being X has officially found his new, anger-fueled champion. Meanwhile, Tanya finds herself standing alone in a quiet, empty church. She glares up at the statue of Being X, her finger twitching over the trigger of her rifle. But she ultimately lowers her weapon and walks away, out on a transport ship heading toward the scorching desert. She reflects on the bitter irony of her situation. The Empire just wanted peace through absolute, logical dominance, but by acting like an unstoppable tyrant, they essentially forced the rest of the world to band together to destroy them. Tanya and her battalion touch down in the blazing southern desert. She gathers her mages and delivers a brutally simple briefing. High Command has no grand strategy anymore. Their only objective is to kill the enemy standing in front of them. Back in the Imperial capital, the generals sweat nervously, wondering how one tiny mage battalion can possibly hold back an entire coalition army. Eric, however, just stares at the tactical map. He coldly assures his peers that they have nothing to worry about, because Tanya is a literal devil in human skin. Out in the desert, Tanya flashes an unhinged, predatory grin. She officially declares war on Being X, loudly proclaiming that if he refuses to do his job properly, her battalion will gladly take his place. The World War is in full swing, and the Devil of the Rhine is ready to paint the desert red. As the entire world gears up for another war, Tanya visits an old friend to get his blessing. Inside a cathedral, it seems as if she's chanting words of prayer for him. However, as soon as Tanya regains her senses, she shoots the statue's head clean off. Having declared war on her friend, she heads out of the cathedral. Meanwhile, Victoria assembles a new battalion to serve under Tanya for fighting the new war. Back in the city of Berun, a rich old man holds up a picture of Tanya. Inspired by the legendary Epstein, he begins to do questionable things while looking at her. At the same time, in a military headquarters of the New Republic, Mary Sue walks out in her soldier uniform. Her eyes glow yellow, inspired by Being X, as she swears she will defeat the evil demon known as Tanya. Back in the military headquarters of the Empire, Eric, Hans, and Kurt discuss the current war situation. Eric is skeptical of the military top brass's decision to assign a large number of soldiers to join Tanya's high-mobility battalion. He reminds the other generals that Tanya is literally a monster in human form. Although Eric feels worried about the number of Geneva suggestion violations she will commit, Hans does so sinisterly. He thinks she's the perfect candidate for wiping out a stubborn enemy. Meanwhile, Tanya delivers an introductory speech to a giant battalion waiting for her. With her hands on her chest, she delivers her words with passion. She complains that the world is unfair and imbalanced and tells the soldiers that it's their duty to struggle against it. With fires burning in her eyes and a battlefield only she can see in her mind, she welcomes all of the soldiers to a new hellzone. Unfortunately, right after her passionate speech, Tanya comes back to reality on the battlefield. As the Empire's eastern front is assaulted by forces from the Federation, Tanya's new soldiers struggle to hold on. Unlike her old special combat unit, which is used to unpredictable battlefields, these new soldiers are basically untrained. Tanya watches as her infantrymen hide like cowards and her tanks blindly charge into the enemy ranks, while her paper tiger tanks struggle to hit even a single mark. The artillerymen create another mess for her. They shoot shell after artillery shell, trying to destroy an enemy base, but soon run out of ammunition. Tanya grows enraged, knowing that they wasted a large amount of valuable ammo for an insignificant target. In addition to these normal soldiers, the capital also assigned her a new batch of mages. Unfortunately, they're not nearly as talented as her old mages and completely fail to be useful. Tanya sighs, knowing that she just didn't have time to train these new guys in war. She gets no further time to think as Victoria alerts her to 4 incoming enemy fighter jets. Since Tanya's mages are currently far away from these jets, their ground forces remain completely unprotected from the aerial assault. On the ground, the infantrymen get destroyed by one of the jets. Thinking they're doomed, they all scream in terror. Thankfully, Tanya personally blows the jet apart. Grants comes over to take down the rest of the jet, but she stops him. Preparing to destroy the rest of the jets, she tells him to protect the retreating ground soldiers instead. Then, Tanya loads her gun and flies off towards the other jets, watching a literal child facing them by herself. The jet pilots mock Tanya for her arrogance. The fighters open fire, but Tanya's computational jewel automatically blocks it with a shield, as she easily dodges the rest of their attacks. The pilots finally realize they're facing off against the Devil of the Rhine herself, not some ordinary chump. They continue trying to attack her, but she distracts them with a smoke grenade and takes out another jet. On the ground, Tanya's soldiers spot the fighters above them. They try to shoot them out with anti-air missiles, but manage to hit their own commander instead. Tanya screams at her dumb soldiers' pathetic insults, but this gives the pilots a chance to strike her. One of them gets in range to shoot her, but Tanya only grins like a demon. Suddenly, she takes out a knife and smashes through his window. After destroying the pilot and his jet, she sets her sights on the last fighter jet. The surviving pilot completely gives up on her and simply tries to escape. He turns back and flies high into the clouds, praying to God to save him. Hearing his words, Tanya only grows more frustrated. The soldier panics at her voice, but she starts praying and charging up her ultimate spell. Finally, she kills the last soldier with an epic explosion spell. After cleaning up the jets, Tanya learns that her ground soldiers have finally started retreating. Unfortunately, she gives them no time to rest after the battle. She calls out all of the new soldiers, calling their commanders to her tent for a lecture on their incredible performance. First, she scolds Captain Ahrens for sending his tanks out like headless chickens. She also reminds the artillery captain, Maybert, that each artillery shell costs more than his net worth. She insults the infantry leaders Thon and Thompson for holding up and presenting their soldiers to the enemy for free. Finally, she pokes the mage Captain Wustman for exposing his vulnerable mage soldiers so much. As the soldiers hear her scolding, one of them tells her that a troop should never give up the initiative against the enemy. However, Tanya reminds him that the battlefield is different from the textbook theories he has learned. She points out that this offensive theory only applies when their side has enough manpower to be equal to the enemy. In reality, the Empire's forces were severely disadvantaged, so they needed to regroup and fight back from a stronger spot instead of becoming sitting ducks. As the Eastern forces narrowly recover from their awful performance, the war continues to expand on all fronts of the Empire. Although the Empire conquered the Entente Alliance to the north, the rebel forces are still proving to be a problem. Towards the south, the Free Republic is another brewing threat that must be dealt with. In the east, the Empire faces another monstrous opponent called the Federation, which is pretty much the Temu Soviet Union. Within the Federation's conference room, a pro-war politician, Loria, reminds his comrades of the Empire's threat. In the past, the Federation refused to deploy its mages in war since it considered them a dangerous weapon against human rights. Now, Comrade Loria points to the Imperial mages, who have deflected their strongest forces with small numbers. Faced with this enemy, he thinks it's only fair that the Federation recalls its mages to fight on an even ground. Towards the west of the Empire, the Allied Kingdom is safe for the time being. With its superior air force, the Allied Kingdom maintains peace, but it is unable to directly interfere in the Great War. Knowing that the Federation is the only nation powerful enough to fight the Empire head-on, their Prime Minister has agreed to ally with them. Navy General Donald wonders if the powerful Federation can be trusted. The Prime Minister remains silent, but his advisor reminds the general that they're only letting the two giant powers wear each other out. Below the Empire, the Ildoa Kingdom, which was previously an ally, has now maintained neutrality. To the west of the Empire, the Unified States are another dark horse, silently helping the Empire's enemies through proxy forces. Meanwhile, in a graveyard within the Federation, Mary Sue watches the fresh graves of unified volunteer soldiers who perished against the Empire. She wonders why these soldiers weren't sent to their homeland, so her commanding officer reminds her that it would only create more trouble for their home country. In the grand picture, the Empire seems to be the strongest force, but its power has made it the common enemy of the whole world. Tanya knows this is true, but she wonders how things came to this point in the first place. She thinks back to her new recruits, who are harder to teach than a pack of literal monkeys. Although she feels frustrated, she knows the only way to go now is to go forward and defeat their enemies. In the middle of her thoughts, she steps out of her hut for some fresh air. Watching snow fall from the sky, she knows that the war will only grow harsher in winter. The Empire gets its strength from its geopolitical positioning and mobility, but when thick snow covers the ground, it will lose this advantage as well. Even Tanya, with her monstrous talent and willpower, knows that she can't win the entire war for a doomed country. Suddenly, Victoria bursts out with an emergency report. According to Major Weiss, 2 infantry brigades from the Federation are currently headed towards their location. Victoria explains that Weiss is currently pulling back with the forces, so Tanya sighs with relief. Without the time to call reinforcements, Tanya thinks they're in for a massive struggle. She gathers all her commanders and explains the current situation to them. At the moment, their forces are outnumbered against the enemy, so Tanya explains that they will lie in wait. Once the enemy begins their move, the Empire's forces will counterattack and take it down from the protection of its fortresses. As the soldiers receive her orders, they all salute her and get in position. Meanwhile, the Federation's forces continue to advance towards their locations in the middle of the night. Tanya asks Thompson why his partner is missing. He explains that Thawne is currently leading a recon squad around the perimeter. Hearing this, Tanya snaps her pen in rage. She screams at Thompson that all soldiers were supposed to lie in wait, but he tries to argue that a recon can help them scout for the enemy. However, Tanya completely refuses to listen. She tells Thompson to give Grant's full command over his unit, before impatiently shutting down the radio. Armed with this rebellious army, Tanya wonders how she's going to survive until the next day. As time passes, none of her soldiers report contact with the enemy. Tanya wonders if the enemy is trying to bait them out, so she doesn't order anyone to move yet. As a precaution, she asks Weiss to give her some intel on the enemy camps. Although he agrees, he warns her that his intel might be inaccurate as it's hard to see at night. Tanya wonders if she should continue waiting, but her artillery asks for a chance to go. Deciding to trust them, she orders the artillery to fire a small number of rounds at Weiss's direction. As the soldiers nod, Weiss gives them the coordinates to a suspected enemy location. Quickly, the artillery loads up its rounds and fires a volley of artillery at the designated spots. Tanya asks Weiss if the artillery shots force the enemy to move, but he reports no movement. Hearing this, she thinks that the enemy is patiently waiting to bait her soldiers out of their locations. She warns everyone to stay sharp and remain at their spots. As the soldiers continue to wait, nothing happens. Victoria wonders why the battlefield is so silent despite the earlier enemy movements. As time passes, even Tanya gets confused by the situation. Soon, Weiss gives her an update. He reveals that previously, the enemy brigades were moving closely to avoid being detected. Since Tanya's artillery fired accurately, they actually wiped out most of the enemy forces. Hearing this, Tanya realizes that the Federation soldiers are even dumber than her own. She finally relaxes and orders her troops to move out and clean up the rest of the enemies. At her order, all of her forces begin their move. The artillery starts firing, the tanks start moving, and the infantrymen rush out to join the chaos. Finally, Tanya sighs, happy to know that the fight is over. Later, after the commanders return from the battle, she congratulates all of them in an unnaturally happy tone. Even Victoria, her most senior officer, is shocked to see her smiling like an innocent girl. However, Tanya keeps up her facade and thanks the newer commanders for their excellent performance in the last battle, even though she's still upset at them for disobeying her in the previous fight. She has to maintain appearances in front of them. In reality, Tanya is their most senior officer. If anything goes wrong in future battles, it would be blamed entirely on her. If that happens, she would need testimonies from her subordinates to prove that she tried her best in a failing war. For this reason, she wants to remain on her officer's good side just in case. However, she warns them all that if the missing Thawne is found to be a traitor, he will be introduced to a friendly firing squad. Afterward, she gathers all her soldiers and celebrates, hoping for an early end to this hellish war. Although everyone celebrates in the moment, Tanya wonders what tricks her enemies will use in the next battle. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.